okay? So be looking for that, and you're going to see a lot of promotion on the open house extravaganza, March 19th. With that, Seth, come on up. Contract dates are critical, and we have business days, calendar days, holidays. It gets confusing, so it's a great topic for us to talk about, and we've had some issues here and there with it, so it's perfect timing.
So I'm already feeling paranoid. If I knew that biceps counted, I would have went to the gym and worn an extra small shirt this morning. So, Patty, I'm sorry. Anyway, hello everybody. Happy and healthy New Year. I got a phone call from Kay last week telling me that a lot of agents are having issues with critical dates and potentially jeopardizing the ability to either retain a deposit or actually get it back. And that's obviously an issue. I'm not going to get into the E&O issues and any war stories or scenarios that I've heard of. We're going to focus on how to fix the problem. And it's relatively simple, actually. I've created a document called Contract Critical Dates List, or chart. This is the key to everything. Organization and making sure you guys, whether you're on the buy side or the sell side, are well aware of the dates that relate to and affect your particular transaction. And without this document, and without the ability to track it on one single page, you're going to be forced to look at the contract every day, every other day, and I know you guys don't have time to do that. The concept is to stay organized and to have one document that has all of your critical dates on it. And if they adjust or change as a result of an addendum, you can simply make the adjustments on your chart. The key is obviously understanding how to complete the chart. If you don't complete it correctly, then obviously nothing's going to flow properly. So we need to understand a few different things. Once you get a contract, my recommendation, because I do it in my office, is you sit down with your chart and a calendar, and you start going page by page through your contract. I'm going to focus on today the dates and items that you need to consider when filling out this chart, but it's relatively self-explanatory if you look at the left-hand side of the chart and you see the various items that I've listed. Those are the dates that you need to focus on in 99% of the transactions you're working on. It starts with a contract effective date. If you have no idea what your contract effective date is, then nothing's going to work, okay? So we need to understand what the contract effective date is, and you'll notice that I've put 2 dashes under the days column because it doesn't matter. You're establishing a date, and that's all you need to fill in on the chart to flow from there. So the contract effective date, regardless of whether or not you're using the FAR/BAR contract or the CRISP contract, and I'm talking FAR/BAR as is or regular repair contract, is the date that the contract is fully executed, initialed, and, capital A-N-D, delivered, okay? So once you have that date, contract fully executed, initialed, and delivered, that's your effective date. And I've talked about the idea of and the concept of shooting out an email to the other side to establish that date and make sure everybody's on the same page as it relates to what you think the effective date is. I do it all the time when I'm doing commercial transactions. I want the other side to tell me they disagree with that date, because if they do, then we've got to talk about it. If they don't, then I know that all my critical dates, from there are going to be accurate, assuming I know how to count when looking at a calendar.
Let's talk about delivered date, because I think this is important. Let's say that a contract is signed, initialed, and not delivered to you. And another contract comes in. If it hasn't been delivered to you, you can call and then send an email or whatever. That deal is off. And you will have a very strong argument that the deal, while signed, is off because you don't have it. Correct?
That's absolutely correct.
Do not lose sight of the fact that delivered in somebody's hand or by email is very critical changed their mind. I sent you an email. Guess what? You might as well turn around. You have no contract. But it's signed. Everybody signed an initial. Nothing.
So there's two ways to handle that issue. If you're going to hand deliver it, get a receipt acknowledging that the contract has been delivered to you on such and such a date. It's so simple to just write it on a piece of paper or email, obviously, where you send an email confirming that the contract has been fully executed, initialed, and delivered, and as such, I believe that the effective date is such and such a date. If you disagree with any of the content of this email, let me know immediately. If you don't hear anything, I think you're in pretty good shape, and more importantly, you have that email that you can print out for your file. Okay? Done.
I would send it. If you, at that point, I would send it with that email. Here is the fully executed. I'll bring you the original if that's what you're trying to accomplish. But once you send it and they receive it, it's delivered. But if you didn't deliver it and you just send an email, I have it, you didn't deliver it. You just said, I have it signed.
Right.
That's not delivered.
Yeah, in that email that you're talking about, Dawn, just attach a copy of it.
I'm just saying, like, say you had it in your car,
It's not gonna get it.
Gadget.
You're not gonna get it.
Allison. It's good.
Did you get it?
Yep.
And then I screenshot, so I have like, they got it.
Right.
You know, so then I double, and then I always put the property address and the effective date. So if I need to search my emails real quick, I just put in.
Commission protection.
Look, the fact of the matter is we can try to be as perfect as we can possibly be. If the other side wants to create an issue because of whatever, the issue or the response to that is, do we have the leverage and do we have the documentation to confirm that we did what we were supposed to do? And that's what matters. As long as we do what we're supposed to do, more often than not, we're going to win that battle. Rich? Now, if you've got an effective contract and there's nothing in the contract that says that in order for this contract to move ahead, it's contingent on something happening, like creating the inventory list that you're talking about, that's no different than amending the contract a month after it's been effective, okay? Okay. Why'd you ask me that? You know, that's a good question, and unfortunately, you know, I've seen so many, arguments on this issue. Some people argue that the attorney review period is to create an effective contract, and you can, argue any point about the contract, business term, language that's pre-printed, and it's fair game. And until that attorney review period expires, you don't have an effective contract. I've seen other people or attorneys argue it's just for business terms. And this is a binding contract, but I'm going to let you know if there's any, I'm sorry, not business terms, boilerplate content. Any boilerplate content that I don't like, and we'll make some adjustments, what have you. My professional and personal opinion is that attorney review period enables a party to get out of the contract. And it's a contingency, if you will.
I think we should
So,
have the term review and approval. Review means review it. Can I change it? I don't know. I reviewed it. Review and approval. Now, if the attorney doesn't approve it, we're out.
for any reason. So to Kay's point, I think it's a contingency. To Scott's point, to make it very clear that that's what your intent is, to create a contingency so that a party can get out of the contract. It's all in wording, okay? So review and approval, by the attorney within the 2 or 3 day period that you're establishing is what you need to do. The effective date would be once that contract is actually approved. You know, once the contingency actually expires and the attorney, you know, hasn't, you know, rejected it or whatever the case may be. I don't know off the top of my head.
I would consider that a term of a contract, but if it's accepted, the date would start at the time the contract is accepted, and the 3-day right of
We know nobody's putting up deposits until their attorney reviews the contract. We know that they're not starting the contingency on financing until their attorney reviews the contract. So, I mean, conceptually, it doesn't make sense to establish an effective date before the attorney has actually approved it, because the whole thing's going to fall by the wayside if the attorney doesn't approve it. To Allison's point, I don't know off the top of my head. I haven't seen that addendum in quite some time, but I would assert and maintain, if that is the case, and I will look at that when I get back to the office, you put your attorney review language in the additional terms section, and you're very clear that it's review and approval, and the effective date. Why don't we do this? The effective date of the contract will not start until the approval period expires. Absolutely. 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 Contracts are beautiful because you can modify them, you can change them, you could alter them with language that the parties agreed to. It requires a little bit more work on our part, but as long as we understand the language that we're creating in our documents and we follow our critical dates, we're safe. So
I would argue, and I would take the position that if you have 3-day right of rescission for the attorney approval, that if everyone signed off on it, you have a contract. Subject to the attorney review, but during that period, you can't have that contract sold out from under you.
all right, so you're disagreeing with me?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, sure.
Buyer's attorney approval. This contract is contingent upon buyer's attorney approving this contract. If buyer's attorney disapproves this contract, the buyer may terminate this contract by delivering written notice to seller on or before 3 days from effective date. The buyer shall be refunded the deposit paid by releasing.
So the effective date is.
All right, so they're establishing the effective date under that particular addendum. But if you don't use that addendum and you're just putting the language in your contract, 3-day attorney review, then you don't have that addendum to support the assertion that the effective date is as of the date the contract is signed. Well, again, depends on what side of the coin you're on, okay? If you're on the buyer's side or the seller's side. That's the whole point of the discussion. So thank you for pointing that out. If you want to establish an effective date immediately, use the addendum. If you don't want to establish an effective date immediately because you're on the buyer's side, you don't want all the time periods to start ticking, you know, until the attorney has had the opportunity to review and approve it, then you put additional language in.
But just understand, as we have this gray area here, you could take that position, the other party could not take that position. So, you know, this is the problem with contracts. It's subjective. And whatever side you're on, or whatever attorney's on the other side, could change that. So just understand, the best language you use that, you know, is contractual, the best chance that you're going to be able to prevail.
I mean, here's an analogy to what we're talking about. With a short sale, if you use a short sale addendum, and thank God we're not doing short sales that much anymore, right? But if you remember, the short sale addendum had specific language that said time frames other than the effective date and the time for acceptance do not start ticking until the bank actually approves the short sale. Well, same concept here. If you're on the buyer's side and you have an attorney review, you don't want your time frames to start until your attorney's reviewed the contract. So it's what you write into your contract that's going to enable that to happen or not happen. If you use the addendum that Allison is suggesting, the language is in there that it's 3 days from the effective date. So that would hurt you from the buyer's side. It would help you from the seller's perspective. Okay?
I mean, with the attorney review and approval?
you really don't have a contract.
I totally disagree.
Look, I think
I just want to make this point. You also have a mortgage contingency that has to be met in there. You have a contract, but you have a mortgage contingency. Can you take a contract? No. The point is, you have a contingency to have an attorney review it and approve it. Could you take a backup offer if this approval does not come in? Sure. But could you now just say, you know what, in this 3 days, we just received another offer. We're not gonna let you review it. We're not gonna let you approve it. We're taking another offer, even though we all signed off on it. There's no way that's fine.
Yeah, I think, Aileen, Scott's right. It's a binding contract. The fact of the matter is, though, with the contingency, you can get out of it, okay? So to the extent that you're thinking about taking backup offers, it's risky, yet you still have the ability to use the attorney review and approval period to get out to avoid any problem. But you still have a binding contract.
From the seller's standpoint, though, what if, we're obligated to tell the seller if any other offers come in? So what if an offer comes in and it's a higher price and the seller says, you know what, they're fooling around with their attorney, I want to accept this.
They will have to have legal advice from their attorney telling them to break it and bind themselves to 2 contracts. Look, all we can do is give them advice. But just understand this, if there's an attorney approval and review, and you have a signed, sealed, delivered contract, you have to go through that 3-day or 2-day right of rescission. You can take a backup, you can play hardball. If they change anything, you can say, well, we're done, and accept the other one. But during that time, they signed, both parties.
In good faith.
In good faith, they obligated themselves, and that's just the way it is.
All right. Oh, boy.
I always get the question about when is the commitment date, and people don't know whether to count the effective date as day 1 or the next day.
You start counting the next day. I was going to get to that. Tomorrow. Okay? Okay. That actually...
What happens if the last initial is not the same day that they sign? And you put that, it's okay only to say the effective day is the 20th instead of the 19th, but beside the initial, the last initial doesn't put the date.
That's the effective date.
Are you saying you get the last initial after everybody's signed?
Yes.
So that would be the date.
Yes.
That would be the date, when you get that last initial and you deliver.
I deliver and I say that the 20th instead of the 19th is the effective date, but in the contract doesn't say the 20th because all the signatures was the 19th. It's okay.
Okay.
Or we have to put the
Okay,
20th.
so all right, if I understand the question, what I've said in the past before, and I'm a proponent of this, but I don't see it done often, although people that use DocuSign, it automatically generates a date. When you sign a contract, you date it. When you initial a contract, you should put dates by your initials as well, okay? Well, then it's based on, when you actually got the document, back, initialed. I mean, a lot of this is by the hip unless you follow certain procedures and protocols. And I realize that other agents are sometimes presenting contracts to you, and they're not sitting here, so they're not educated the way you are. But the fact of the matter is, you got to go based on the fact pattern, the scenario.
You acknowledge by email, I received the last initial on the 20th at 5 o'clock. We now have an effective date. You're done.
Well, hold on. Yes and no. You got the initial at 5 o'clock on the 20th, but did you deliver?
Yes.
So now you got to deliver as well, okay? And then through email, you acknowledge exactly what's transpired. Got the last initial, and I've delivered the contract on such and such a day. We hereby believe that the effective date of this contract is X, okay? If that's the date.
If you execute a contract on the 20th, you don't have it delivered till the 23rd. Do you have an effective date on the 20th?
No, absolutely. 23rd.
Date is delivered.
Date
Signed,
delivered.
delivered.
I'll read it right out of the contract. Here's the FAR bar as is contract, and it's the same for the residential. It says, the effective date of this contract shall be the date when the last one of the buyer and seller has signed or initialed and delivered this offer or final counteroffer. That's the effective date.
On there could be 3 days later, depending on when the parties understand that it was initially
And that's the key. You can't just sit and rest on your laurels that you've got a signed contract. You've got to get it delivered. You can't just keep it in your car in the trunk. And how many times have I heard the situation, it's been fully executed, but I forgot to get it to him. It was in my trunk or I went out of town. You have to get it delivered. I would do that. I would absolutely do that. I can't get it.
Yeah, we gotta get through this, so let's get the questions real quick.
Files, you can actually have it, the initial, and it'll automatically date it. So check that box.
Yeah, so AppFiles does it, DocuSign does it. It's a beautiful thing where you see the initials and there's a date right beneath it. And that is extremely helpful for this whole process.
So you don't have effective contract, because some realtors call an offer a contract, that's not the case. When you have an effective contract is when it's all initial, signed,
Delivered.
And delivered.
Yes.
that's when you have.
Precisely. Precisely.
So if the calendar day starts the next day, it's delivered today, but then your clock starts ticking the next.
That's correct. That's correct.
So I'm just gonna say, I didn't.
What's that?
Say you got it delivered that today.
You have until 11:59 in the regular FAR bar contract, 11:59 to do your stuff for that day. Okay? Then the next day is obviously 12 o'clock.
So even if you got it at 9 o'clock in the morning, the effective date.
That's correct. Now, if you got it at 9 o'clock, today would be the effective date. Tomorrow you start counting. Okay? And as it relates to the Chris contract, 5 p.m. Okay? I don't know why the FAR bar contract doesn't have a 5 p.m. time frame in here. Chris contract does. So we're going to go, and I don't know if you agree or disagree. We've had this discussion, Kay. Is it 11:59 in the FAR bar? I believe that it is. Okay? Okay. So let me continue, and you know, we'll try to get through some more of this material, and then you can ask some more questions. So we talked about when we start counting. It's the next day. But it's important to also understand, because a lot of people make this mistake, are we counting business days or are we counting calendar days? Okay? I've made it very clear on this chart with the little stars that with the CRISP contract, to the extent you get one, okay, I know we use the FAR bar here at Lang, but if you get a CRISP contract, it is business days, okay? So business days are working days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, okay? The only time that's not the case is if there's a national holiday, okay? Martin Luther King Day on Monday, national holiday, do not count that, okay? With the FAR bar contract, regardless of whether or not it's as-is or a repair contract, it's calendar days, okay? So you count every single day, even weekends and holidays. However, if your critical date ends on a weekend or a national holiday, it will roll to the next business day. And in the contract, it says, going back to this 5 o'clock thing, you have until 5 o'clock until 5 o'clock, the end of that next business day, for that critical date to expire. Okay? That's the only reference in the FAR bar contract to 5 o'clock. Everybody understand that? Okay. Which part? Okay. So in the FAR bar contract, if your date falls out, your critical date falls out on a weekend or a national holiday, you're going to roll till the next business day, and you have till 5 o'clock on that business day for your critical date to expire. Okay? So conceptually, what I want you to do on this document is go through the contract. You're going to notate in the days column, depending on whether or not you have a CRISP or a FAR bar, how many days are identified in the contract for each critical date. And then based on that number of days, and based on whether or not it's a business day contract or a calendar day contract, you're going to count, using your calendar, which is in front of you, when your period expires. And you're going to insert it in the date column. Okay? Very simple. And you're going to constantly look at this all the time to make sure you're aware of when things expire, particularly inspection periods, particularly finance periods. okay? And obviously your closing date. And I suggest that once you fill this out, and perhaps we can create, we were going to talk to Seth about this, an Excel spreadsheet so it's a little bigger for you. Once you fill it out, give it to your client. Let your client know that you've created one of these, that you're on top of their transaction, and, you know, let them stay in the loop along with you. Okay, I think that's important. When I get, you know, commercial contracts, let's say, and I put critical date lists, I always send them to my client. And I want them to have it, even though they're relying on me to make sure that nothing slips through. Okay?
Go ahead.
I'm just a little confused about the title evidence in the survey. I always thought the title company took care of the title evidence. I didn't have to worry about that date or the survey. You guys order that, you do all that.
You technically don't have to worry about it. I want you to know, just in case you want to be on top of something, and just in case, and I hate this argument, I've seen lawyers make it, and it really screws up a contract and a transaction. Lawyers will sometimes try to get their clients out of a transaction if the title company didn't deliver the title evidence within the time frame in the contract. And they will use it as a slippery, nasty, disgusting way to get out of a deal. And they're technically right. And I implore my office to make sure we keep track of that date, because that's the last thing I want to happen, is to lose a deal over nonsense like that, okay? Right. So that's the reason why I have it on here. I want you guys to be aware, even though it's not really something you have to focus too much on, okay? The critical dates for you guys: deposits, okay? Loan commitment, obviously your closing date, and most importantly, your inspection periods. I've seen a lot of deals go awry, and I'm sure that's what Kay's talking about, when the inspection periods pass, and then all of a sudden somebody wants to try to get out, or, you know, what have you. So those are critical dates. And the concept is to go through the contract and pull the dates. And I can give you basically the paragraphs that you want to look at for each of these things, time permitted, so that you're not searching all over the contract. Although what's beautiful about the FAR/BAR contract is it's a form contract, and you fill in the applicable time periods and dates, so you're really looking for handwritten or typewritten stuff, okay? And you guys know how to read. You know the deposit section, you know the closing date section. Okay, we won't assume. Bill? Right. The reason why that's worded that way, and that's in the parenthetical, is because sometimes you have very quick closings. And obviously you can't create enough time spread if you've got a very quick closing. There are some closings that we try to get done in 5 to 7 days. So obviously a 15-day period is not going to work. So they say it's really the earlier of 5 days prior to closing, or the time frame that you put in there, or sometimes it automatically defaults to a 10 or a 15-day period. But to the extent that it falls out on a weekend, you still are going to roll to the next business day. Correct. Now, potentially. Now, what sometimes happens is a lot of folks, and this is another reason why you need to pull your calendar out, a lot of folks are putting closing dates on weekends or national holidays. So I've seen that happen before. So the discussion then becomes, well, do we have to close before or do we have to close after? It's really up to the parties. I mean, title companies usually can get ready one day before or one day after. It's not, you know, too big of a deal. It's up to the parties if you're going to roll forward or you're going to roll backwards. Okay? But frankly, look at a calendar before you agree to a closing date and make sure it's not on a weekend or a Sunday. I mean, I'll work, but I know you guys don't want to work. All right? So that's something that's important to look at as well. All right?
I have a date we need to talk about. Time of acceptance. Time of acceptance. So let's say that you go back and forth in negotiation. You have 2 days to respond. The seller has 2 days to respond. Do you have a contract? there is no time protection period of when you're waiting for somebody to accept a counteroffer. It is an open contract. They might sign off on it, and then you have a binding deal once it's delivered. But during that period of acceptance, anything can happen. Either party can terminate. It wasn't delivered, you didn't sign off, I'm done, I'm out. Another offer could come in. Seller's free to take it. So just understand that just because you have 2 days to counter does not mean that there is a contract that you can kind of figure it out and decide, maybe I'm gonna sign it, maybe I'm not. The buyer could say, I'm out.
And I researched that, so Scott's correct. I wasn't sure, but he's correct.
On the loan commitment date, you know, a commitment always comes in, you've been approved, but then it has certain contingencies. So what would be considered a true commitment date?
The date that's in here, whether it's 35 days, 45 days, 55 days, whatever the number is there, that's the date you want to track. And they're always going to come in with conditions, but it's still a commitment, subject to those conditions being satisfied. But that's the date that we want to track. So to the extent that you are representing a seller or a buyer for that matter, and you want to keep track of, you know, when it's due, it's not when the conditions are satisfied, it's when the commitment is actually issued or supposed to be issued.
Yeah, no, my question really is, in other words, when we receive a letter, what can we, and they say you've been approved, but pending these conditions, and they really don't have a full commitment.
No, that's not true. The definition of a loan commitment is a commitment to loan money, but they're always going to be subject to conditions. That's the way commitment letters are generated. And Steve can speak to this point, I'm sure. All right? So you're never going to get a letter, I mean, not in the 26 years that I've done it, that say, here's your loan, there's nothing for you to do, we're just going to show up on the closing date with your money.
Which, by the way, yeah, they're close. So people, can you give me a commitment in 20 days? Now, by the way, Florida's the only place that has that type of language in its contract. It will say conditional loan approval in every other state in the United States. It's such a problem. So you have to really define commitment with the other. Now, from a contractual standpoint, what the spirit of the law is that it's a conditional loan approval, conditional commitment, because you're not going to have clear title, you're not going to have a clear title with no survey exception. Even if the lender's done, you're not going to, still not going to be clear close. A commitment is a clear close, but the spirit, that's the letter of the law. The spirit of the law, you're getting a conditional loan approval. Now, everybody understands that supposedly when they're on the buyer side. But when they're on the listing side, they're like, what do you mean there's conditions on here? And then they have to explain it to their seller. So these are the type of conversations you have to have up front when you're accepting financing as a listing agent. Up front with your buyer, up front with your seller, so everybody understands that you're not getting a full commitment. And I have that conversation, honestly, with a lot of real estate agents when they say, you get a commitment in 20 days? Depends on what type of commitment you're talking about. So the contract in this regard is poor. So you really have to address it. And by the way, look how long you guys spent on this one small subject, one date so far. I don't know how anybody doesn't have an attorney on the transaction, represented by an attorney. I mean, I don't even, first of all, I don't get it in Florida that attorneys aren't involved, because from the standpoint of writing contracts, if you're not attorneys, but that's the way it is. I can't understand why anyone, I mean, you've answered probably 75 questions already.
If a buyer asks you, do
What
I
date?
need an attorney, what's the answer?
Yes.
Yes, it's not a discussion.
What's the second question? Which attorney do you use? That's the third question. And I actually reduced my fee for you guys. It's true. Yeah. Right. So here's what,
Not a letter. Not a letter. I mean, no lender is gonna give you an instant denial letter. It doesn't work like that. It goes through compliance. So you can get verbal, verbal or email from a lender. They're not gonna give you, if they're giving you a denial right away, it means that I wrote it. And you can be confident that what I write is okay, but that's not really true. You'll get something in the mail or by email.
all right, but conceptually, what Kay's talking about is if you're not going to get the commitment by that date, you know, will you show something, or will you get something that shows that you've been denied? Something. But here's the better answer, I think. The contract says, and this is the FAR bar, if buyer does not receive loan commitment by the loan commitment date, which we're tracking right here with this critical dates list, then thereafter, either party may cancel this contract up to the earlier of the date that the buyer actually delivers written notice that they received the commitment, or 7 days prior to the closing date, which date for purposes of this paragraph 8B2 shall not be modified by 5A. And 5A, you guys might remember, is the CFPB, paragraph that gives you the ability to extend if the lender needs additional time to satisfy CFPB requirements. So it's a 7-day period prior to closing that you have to cancel the contract, okay? It's very important, but that's not really a critical date per se. Your critical date is the loan commitment. If you don't receive a loan commitment, it doesn't mean the contract is over, okay? It means somebody's got to do something before that time frame to either cancel it or acknowledge that they're moving ahead.
Here's the important thing. If you get a loan commitment subject to a bunch of commitments.
Conditions, yeah.
And let's say you're within the time period, you tell the seller they got a loan commitment, they have to fulfill some things, and then 10 days later, they're rejected because they aren't able to fulfill, they're able to get their money back because they were within their time period and rejected, and then it's surprise.
Right. If they've gotten the commitment in a timely fashion based on our critical date, it goes on to say if buyer delivers written notice of receipt of the loan commitment to seller and this contract does not thereafter close, the deposit shall be paid to seller unless failure to close is seller's default, property-related conditions of the loan commitment have not been met, appraisal, or the loan is not funded due to financial failure of the buyer's lender. So if there are conditions in that loan commitment that haven't been satisfied, the buyer has technically the ability to get out of the contract. Now, the problem is as sellers and sellers counsel and agents, what have you, we're always fighting that, well, you didn't use best efforts, you didn't use due diligence, you didn't give them the tax returns that they needed, you didn't provide the W-2s. I mean, we're always going to try to throw some mud up on the wall, but the real world, this is what the contract provides for, and
property-related, appraisal-related, or my bank goes under. If it's financially related, so if the guy loses his job, or he can't produce assets, or he doesn't have enough, we find out that we calculated his income wrong, I think the EMD is in play at that point, because you pass the commitment date. It says property, it says appraisal, and it says, whatever my bank goes out of business. So that's my understanding, and that's why it's so scary once you pass the commitment date. Is that your understanding?
well, I don't understand your question. What are you asking?
So I deliver a commitment, and the conditions are, I have the 2014 and 15 tax returns, but for some reason I don't have one of the W-2s. Okay? It's a condition. It's no big deal. We get the W-2, all of a sudden we get the W-2 after, and it says something completely different. We have to calculate his income again, and he doesn't qualify. Under what you just said, they can get their earnest money deposit back. I'm saying that's not the case.
No. I'm saying that the seller gets to retain the deposit unless any of those items kick in.
Okay, then I'm
Okay, yeah, unless.
So the conditional, when they deliver the conditional commitment, which is going to be 99% of the time, just know, you better be working with a lender, you're representing the buyer, that you trust is going to deliver on that conditional something wrong with the property, the appraisal has a problem, or the bank was out of business.
Everybody understand the banter back and forth? Okay. Any questions before we move on?
A year ago, when TRID came out, I began to be very interested in establishing these dates, these critical dates that we're talking about. And it came to mind that this was a programmable problem, so that you didn't have to counts could go wrong and so forth. And so I approached my son, who happens to be a master developer with about 30 employees, and asked him, is this something that could be a worthwhile project to undertake? Closing Helper was born. Scott and Seth saw a very crude Closing Helper app some months ago. Since then, we have had marketing people work on this. We've grown in sophistication. We've added new features. And this is what we have in short. We have a platform on which all persons involved in a closing can be on, a common platform. We have instantly calculated these dates, the default dates, on your CRISP or FAR-BAR contract. So you get those instantly. Do it on your phone. Put in a closing right now. All the default dates are interchangeable if there is an agreement on your contract. You can change the date. You can change it in the timeline that you have. All deadlines are attested on this system. So, we talk about making sure everybody does the right thing. When the deadline is finished, it is attested, and the person attesting it is on that.
What I like to suggest,
All closings are archived.
what I like to suggest is that
Closing
the
Helper.
appropriate time. Okay, thank you.
Good for you.
And judging by how confusing these dates are, this could be a great tool, and at the appropriate time, we'll talk about it. Continuing on.
I don't know if I can. So what I thought we'd do in the limited time we have left is help you guys know which paragraphs you need to look at in order to complete this chart. Although I think she doesn't want you to use this chart. She'd rather you use her son's app, which may make sense. But why don't we do this? If everybody can just have their chart handy with a pen, I'm going to give you the paragraphs that you need to jump to. Keep it very simple when you're going through the contract. On the FAR-BAR contract, okay, the FAR-BAR contract, whether it be as is or repair, for the initial deposit and the additional deposit, you're going directly to paragraphs 2A and 2B, okay? Buried in those paragraphs are the time frames relative to putting up the initial and the additional deposit, okay? So you'll be able to count the days based on your effective date and insert the number of days and the date in which that deposit is due, okay? As it relates to the loan commitment, all right, that is paragraph 8 in both of the contracts. Okay, not only the loan commitment date, which is a defined term in there, but the deadline to actually submit the application. Remember, you have to submit an application before a lender is going to go through the process of approving and issuing a loan commitment. Okay, so those two dates are going to be in paragraph 8. All right, the closing date. The closing date is always paragraph 4 in the FAR-BAR contract. Okay? The inspection period. Most important date, I think. All right? In the Repair contract, it's paragraph 12 in the repair contract. In the as-is contract, it's also paragraph 12. You see that inspection period? All right. What do we have left here? The title evidence. Again, I talked to you about why I want that in there, in the critical dates list. That's paragraph 9C in both the FAR bar as is and the residential, or the repair one, excuse me. 9C. Okay.